some of those prominent stable coins, like Circle, for example, have major alliances with BlackRock, and BlackRock has a minority stake in them, and have said in their some of their SEC filings that the stable coins can be used to manipulate the price of Bitcoin, for example.
All right, we've already here in the opening minutes we put a lot of things on the table. I want to start now piecing them together into a worldview that somebody that doesn't have your depth of knowledge, where they can begin to understand how this all pieces together. So, me as somebody on the outside of this, I look at it. I'm way more worried about um, whether Republicans or Democrats get into office based entirely on what their economic policy is. You're really the first person that's been clear in saying, no, 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 you're looking at the wrong level of analysis. You need to understand that they're both going to the same people to come up with their policies. So whatever promises you hear, that's ultimately not going to matter. So what I want to understand is if BlackRock is really where we should be paying attention, if Larry Fink is who they're both basically going to go to, or Larry Fink affiliated entities or people, what is BlackRock's agenda? What do they want?
Yeah, so I think there's things that we can look at as far as BlackRock is concerned that sort of give us clues as to what their agenda may be. And the most concerning thing to me about that, as it relates to people like Larry Fink, is that Larry Fink is on record saying things like markets don't really like democracies because they're messy. Markets like totalitarian governments. And Larry Fink is someone who's been very obsessed with risk management most of his career, and sees essentially, free democracies and arguably also a free market in some senses as, as generating more risk than perhaps he would like to handle. So when you're able to sort of control and centralize both markets and governments, you're able to control the amount of risk that's there. And so maybe that's good for asset managers like Larry Fink, who are obsessed with this kind of stuff. But for regular people, ultimately it reduces the amount of freedom that we would have. So I sort of see Larry Fink as someone who's looking to centralize power and centralize wealth, and obviously that has major impacts on regular Americans, the people that aren't necessarily in the oligarch class or in the top 1% that would benefit from those types of policies.
Whoa, okay. That is extremely direct. Okay, so you have somebody who understands this is about risk mitigation, that a democratic government is going to have a lot more volatility. I mean, even as I think about America having a small standing in the world, sort of being the world's cop, but every 4 years we have this sort of violent whiplash from one policy direction to the other. I've often thought about how jarring that must be to other world leaders. And so, for better or worse, I can actually see what you mean. If somebody is investing in the marketplace, they want to make sure that they have a predictable level of risk so that they can not completely control the outcomes, but that they can narrow the band of outcomes so that they don't have this gigantic potential downside. And the way that we get that is totalitarian top-down control. Okay. That's a very clear thesis. Now the question becomes, how are they going about doing it? What are the mechanisms?
Well, I think this is something that's much larger than just BlackRock specifically, but in terms of looking at what BlackRock has done in terms of U.S. fiscal policy, I think it's important to sort of look at their role in the '08 crisis, which began the policy of quantitative easing, and later on they were called upon by the Trump administration to help develop COVID fiscal response. But actually, it began before then. So in the fall of 2019 at Jackson Hole, and this is also, should point out, this is based on the very excellent research of John Titus of the YouTube channel Best Evidence. Essentially, this document was presented by BlackRock to central bankers at Jackson Hole. It was called Going Direct, is what they called it. And basically, the idea was to have what was generated via quantitative easing not just go to public sector affiliated entities, but also directly into the hands of the private sector, i.e. Wall Street. And that was essentially what was proposed. And this begins to be implemented well before COVID, when the repo market goes a bit haywire. at the end of 2019 and sort of continues through up until COVID was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, at which point, there's a lot of calls between Larry Fink and Steve Mnuchin and other top figures and the economic team of the Trump administration. And then they began to basically affect this policy or sort of really supercharge this policy and go direct even more. So there's a lot of, things that are happening in terms of economic policy that ultimately resulted in what we're dealing with now, I guess, debasement of U.S. American consumer purchasing power. But a lot of this money, at a time when there were lockdowns and there was really very little economic activity going on, they're being given all of this. People like BlackRock asset managers are being given all of this money, and then they can help. And instead of helping out Main Street, they go up and buy up all the assets. They buy shares in their own ETFs, for example. And basically what happened during COVID was a massive wealth transfer. And if you look at the statistics of it, the top 1% in the United States benefited hugely during COVID, but the rest of us did not. Maybe some people got stimulus in that, but a lot of consequences downstream of those policies have resulted in this inflationary situation we're in and a lot of other economic issues that people are dealing with. And so BlackRock sort of, I would argue, oversaw these wealth transfers sort of to the benefit of Wall Street and not Main Street. And it seems like if there is another crisis coming down the pipe, which it seems there is, BlackRock is likely to do essentially the same thing, whatever policy they help design. And it really should be a point of public discussion why BlackRock has so much influence over what the Treasury Department does or what the Federal Reserve does. And really, as far as U.S. COVID fiscal policy is concerned, which, by the way, even though that was started under Trump, a lot of this continued through into the Biden administration, who, again, Biden's top economic people are former BlackRock executives. Why is this particular asset manager on Wall Street so embedded with the development of U.S. fiscal policy, which at times when that fiscal policy is meant to help regular Americans, it has not been doing that when BlackRock is involved. And really, this is something that most Americans don't even know happened.
All right, so this is begging a really interesting question, which is the idea of going direct sounds awesome. Like if I'm an individual person and you're going to do quantitative easing, which for anybody watching this that doesn't know that, it's printing money. You're injecting money into the system. Yay. Which is actually terrible. I have a whole thing on that. We'll get to that later. But just for now, so the Fed is printing money, it's putting it into the system. Now, putting it into the system via treasuries or bonds, that's lame because ultimately the people that hold those assets, they get richer. The average person does not hold those assets, and therefore you're bypassing the middle class, let's call it the average person. So I always thought, oh man, that's a terrible way to do it. So I would probably have fallen for, let's go direct. Let's just give the people the money. So how is it that by going direct, if I'm understanding the mechanism there, where we're giving you a stimmy check, it's going directly to you, it's in your name, you get a check cut to you. How does that facilitate the wealth transfer more rapidly?
Maybe I didn't explain that exactly well, but the idea of going direct isn't so much that no, not at all. And it's also, again, this is the work of John Titus, and so I'm sort of giving it, describing his work, so I may not be doing the best job in explaining it either. But as I understand it, it was about putting the money not just in public sector linked entities, but also to the private sector, i.e. Wall Street banks directly. So instead of Wall Street banks trying to get some of this, QE generated money or
controller
or
is
whatever,
fucking up.
having to go to a public sector entity to obtain them,
Like,
they just receive it
it's
directly.
moving by its fucking self.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily going to regular Americans directly. It's not going directly from, money creation
It's
to
been
regular
fucking
Americans.
up. I didn't
It's
say
going,
nothing, but
instead of being just,
the
money generated
controller is already fucking up. Or it's been
it's
fucking
going
up.
directly to the private sector. So they don't
Got it.
have to get it from the public sector entities. It just goes straight to them. So it
Got
facilitates,
it.
so they don't really have to do the public-private partnership thing to get their hands on it anymore. They just receive it directly. They take out the middleman, I guess, from their perspective.
Okay, and what is that mechanism? So I understand when the Fed is buying bonds, that's very clear. It's an easy way to get things into the system. But if they're just giving the money to the banks, how is that explained or recognized on a P&L? Like, I don't understand how that makes its way.
Yeah,
You know how many-
to describe the exact mechanism, again, I would refer you to John Titus or his work, his article on Going Direct on the Solari report, which you can view for free. It's very well documented. It describes all of that in detail, and he is, I'm just sort of pointing out his research because I think it's very important as it relates to BlackRock and what their impact on COVID fiscal policy response is. But again, for those very in-depth, explanations of what the mechanisms are and how Going Direct has happened, I would definitely encourage you to either have him on or read his work because it's forensic, very detailed, and he makes just a completely airtight case for what happened as it relates to BlackRock and Going Direct and COVID fiscal response.
Got it. Okay, so I will make my best guess right now, but if Going Direct means that I'm the Fed, I'm giving money directly to banks. Banks still, even if they want to do fractional reserves, they are going to have to get the money into somebody's hands somewhere. Now, you mentioned earlier that they were buying their own ETFs. So,
Yeah.
But it's my understanding that banks don't have ETFs. A company like BlackRock obviously would have ETFs.
They
So
do. Yeah.
would somewhere in the Going Direct philosophy is money ending up getting sent directly to BlackRock, or are they borrowing money from the banks who are getting it directly from the Fed?
Well, in BlackRock's case, there was a funding facility set up. There were several set up during COVID, but there were a couple of them, I think two, that were essentially given to BlackRock to manage. And again, this is a policy that BlackRock wrote well before COVID about what the Fed should do during the next downturn. And then the Fed implements that plan exactly well before COVID-19. And then when COVID-19 happens, they sort of supercharge the policy and then develop these funding facilities allegedly for bailing out Main Street as a result of lockdown policy. And then BlackRock is directly managing a lot of those funds.
Ooh, okay, so I'm going to lay out my understanding of BlackRock, how they work, tie that to what I've just heard you say. This is all very distressing. Okay, so here's my understanding of the way that BlackRock works. BlackRock says, hey, boys and girls, invest your money with us, and we are going to do things like ESG investing. So we're going to, because when you, dear person, invest in your 401k with us, you actually will get voting rights in some of these companies that you now own things in. But what we're going to do is we're going to aggregate all of those rights, and we're going to go in on your behalf, and we're going to push for ESGs and these. And so they themselves, it's not like they had the money and they're investing their own money. They're actually aggregating the capital of people that are investing with them, and they're then aggregating their voting rights. Cool, that was already distressing enough. Now, what I hear you saying is that through this Going Direct policy, the Fed is going, hey, BlackRock, you guys know how to invest money. So as a way to get this stimulus into the economy in a way that will really stimulate Main Street, I'm going to give it to you. You guys will know where to invest that money. You'll know how to aggregate the voting shares and really be able to do something wonderful for this country. Now, if BlackRock were doing something wonderful for this country, we'd be in great shape. But if BlackRock is doing something that isn't wonderful, we're now in a really bad spot. Do I have the gist of this correct?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. And I think now it's perhaps different than in times past where you have, in the case of Trump, Larry Fink used to be, Trump's personal money manager. And, Trump is on record saying that Larry Fink made him a very large amount of money as a result of that partnership. And then in the case of Biden and Kamala, you have, basically their economic policy. Bidenomics, or what will become Kamalanomics or whatever, essentially being designed by former BlackRock executives as well. So, if this is what they did with COVID, the other things that BlackRock has fiscal policy in the past, it seems like that's what we can expect, regardless of who wins in November, if the next 4 years brings us some sort of economic crisis, which it seems likely that there will be some sort of economic event. You have people like the former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan saying that it's very likely the next president is going to deal with the U.S. government debt crisis, for example. So, this isn't something I'm just speculating on. There's like major politicians that say we should very much expect some sort of economic crisis to come on over the next 4 to 5 years. And with Trump having a policy record of putting BlackRock in the where there is an economic crisis, and then Kamala and Biden, have BlackRock run their economic policy. Either way, this is an entity that we should be looking at and scrutinizing because it's very likely they will be developing the fiscal response once again to whatever that crisis is. And they don't have our best interests at heart.
Yeah. All right. So if you had to look at the outcome of the system that's being used right now, which again, I don't say just to recap, a crisis happens. There's a debate to be had as to whether there should be a response or not. But right now, the MO is crisis happens, the Fed steps in to stabilize the market. The way, given previous administrations have handled this, the way that they've started now getting that money into the hands of the street is by using BlackRock to quote unquote know how to best direct that money. And they are, again, just judging it by the outputs of the system, what they're actually doing is facilitating massive wealth transfer from the average American, just simple, African American, to what people call the elites. That word is sort of getting weird.
Yeah, sure. A lot of those words have gotten weird recently, but yes, the 1% of the 1%, to go back to sort of Occupy Wall Street lingo, or something like that. The very top.
Business world is changing at light speed. Market shifts, AI revolution, rising global tension. There is a new obstacle every day. A lot of businesses are struggling to keep up, but some are also thriving. So what are the ones that are thriving? They're using NetSuite by Oracle. Over 38,000 forward-thinking businesses use it to turn rapid change into fuel for growth. With NetSuite, you get one source of truth, real-time insights, and closed books in days, not weeks. So if you're serious about turning uncertainty into opportunity, NetSuite is the tool to do it. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/fear. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/fear. That's netsuite.com/fear. Okay, so if you judge the system by its outputs and say the system is designed to do what it actually does, and give you a system that is designed to leverage a crisis to transfer wealth. Very interesting. How are they doing this in plain sight?
What exactly do you mean by that? Like, how did BlackRock get away with that during COVID?
How did they get away with it during COVID? How is it that I think your expectation would be that when the next crisis happens, that it's going to happen again?
Yeah, well, I think when a crisis is happening, people tend to have emotional responses and tend to be coming from a place of fear, and that tends to prevent people from thinking critically or rationally about situations or about policies. And so a lot of, during COVID, obviously a lot of focus was on COVID-19 itself, on the biosecurity situation, not just so much the financial situation. But for example, if there was a major crisis going forward that would greatly impact Americans' ability to engage in economic activity or have their purchasing power, close to wiped out or something, I think you would see a lot of people really beg for any policy response. Solve this crisis now, we need something, and not really have people think about what is the best policy response to this kind of crisis. People aren't going to think calmly and bring everything to the table, and there isn't. It's very unlikely there will be some sort of calm, open, public debate about it. Generally, what happens is that the government says people are scared and emotional. They clamor for some sort of solution from the government, and the government offers some sort of solution. And, like with COVID-19, BlackRock anticipated the next downturn about a month before the repo market started going haywire and presented to central bankers, this is the policy you should implement during the next downturn. And it's very possible that BlackRock is working on policy papers, for central bankers or other people in, the U.S. government about what policy should be implemented if, this type of crisis happens or that type of crisis happens. It seems like they seem to be designing the policies, I guess, and they've, had, in the Biden administration over the past 4 years, they've been leading his former BlackRock executives have been leading his economic team, bringing us to where we are now, and likely what will influencing what will happen over the next couple of years, whenever or up until this crisis emerges. So it seems, very likely that they'll be, dominating, fiscal response again, and then people, because they're not really aware of how this is developed, or really, there's just not a lot of media coverage about, for example, the role of BlackRock in the Biden administration, or on Kamala's economic team specifically. I've seen very little coverage of things like that. Maybe if folks here and there, because people aren't acquainted with them. But significantly, first that was very fiscal response, I think, as well. It's just sort of written off as this is what the government had to do to respond to the crisis in a lot of situations, but I don't think that's necessarily true, because again, that fiscal response began well before COVID was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, preceded that by like several months, right? So, I don't know. I think it's a complicated situation. It's complicated to anticipate what will exactly happen, but again, history tends to repeat itself in these cases, and the fact that you have BlackRock so embedded in the Democrats specifically, and also have this historical precedent of Trump when he was in office last time, it seems very likely that they'll be doing this again. So I guess my role is to try and generate awareness so we can have a discussion before that time of crisis when people are emotional and afraid and concerned about their money, about whether we should be having BlackRock at the helm of this when the next crisis emerges. I would say no.
Yeah. Okay. So let's ask the obvious question: who should be in charge now? Put in charge of this investing in time?
Well, I don't necessarily have the best answer to that, I guess, because I think our current system, specifically as it relates to the U.S. Treasury Department, has consistently been a revolving door for the last several decades with Wall Street. Goldman Sachs, former Goldman Sachs executives, roles of the Treasury when crises have emerged. So, as an example, you have one of the top guys at Goldman Sachs, Robert Rubin, being a key figure in the Clinton administration's economic policy as Treasury Secretary, and helping engineer the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which creates, arguably the 2008 financial crisis when George W. Bush's Secretary Treasury at the time the crisis happens is Henry Paulson, another former top guy from Goldman Sachs, that allegedly told members of Congress if they didn't bail out the banks that martial law had been declared in the United States, for example. And then when the COVID fiscal response happens, Steve Mnuchin is a former top Goldman Sachs executive as well. So, as far as, the big parties, Democrat and Republican, they tend to appoint people to Treasury that come from these top Wall Street banks that have a history of predatory and arguably criminal behavior. And so, I think there needs to be a much larger structural change, I guess, to prevent that type of policy.
Dude, this game is so fucking retarded, dude. This game is fucked up, dude.
Because historically, that is not what is happening.
All I'm trying to do is get fucking tackles, and it's literally making not allowing me to get tackles.
And I think again, that's sort of a phenomenon. It's not exclusive.
This is the most fucked up game in all of fucking history.
Most aspects, if not all,
I've never seen this shit before.
Regulatory capture, of the people supposedly regulating those industries.
This is the most fucked up game ever, dude.
Top people, at least these days, into those major regulatory.
I'm just trying to get tackled. It's literally not letting me get fucking tackled,
So I think
dude.
we need to find a meaningful way to stop that. Expect that major government fiscal response would be designed with the interest of regular Americans apart, with Main Street apart and not Wall Street apart.
Okay, the question becomes, how do we do that? So walk me through, just so that we're not talking abstract stuff with these.
This game has nothing to do. It's just like, it's very realistic. The NFL is a homosexual Freemasonic.
Stop having their
Fucking bullshit. Well, no, I shouldn't have said
where it's basically being sent to enrich
homo. That's more of a diss at Freemasons,
where you have a lot of
because Freemasons are spiritually homosexual.
decades really about the military industrial complex.
Most of them are. Not all of them, but most of them.
That goes to start in other countries generates
I'm gonna stop you really fast, just because.
And I don't give a fuck about nothing but the truth. And I know people hate the fucking truth.
10 more extremely valid.
Truth is the most hated thing in this fucking world.
Regular Americans want to stop.
That's why I am the most hated motherfucker that walks the face of this fucking earth.
Whenever I bring that up, so,
Because I am a living representative of divine fucking truth.
Say it's going to things that are not actually building necessary infrastructure or for
Do you need
meeting
tax?
Americans' needs.
So money's being taken from them via tax. Just
Yeah, so I think taxpayer money has been people taxpayer wealth and the money brought into the taxes has been misused and essentially stolen for a very long time. Look at the work of Madden, Pittsburgh State Park, for example. They noted that like $21 trillion of U.S. taxpayer money essentially was stolen, and they can't really explain what happened to it. So that alone is very significant.
Let me ask: is taxation in and of itself?
I think under the current system, because if anyone's familiar with my work in my books, for example, I sort of argue that our government has been overtaken by this network of organized crime and intelligence agencies that have essentially used their operations and did so in the post-World War II era. And I think financing their operations when they're at the head, it's not good. And that the fact that our money is being taken from us ostensibly to provide services to us. And if you believe in the development of abroad, the rest of the world, but we know if you look into it that that's not actually what is happening. This money is being used to benefit this particular group that has taken control of our institutions and is very corrupt. I think in that case, yes, it's not good at all. In an ideal system, perhaps I have a different opinion, but that's not the system we have as it is right now. So I think, in this situation, we need to really look at how our taxpayer money is being spent. And a lot of it is spent on weapons. A lot of it is being sent to other countries with no, stipulations on how that money was used, no oversight. An insane amount of money was spent on quote-unquote nation building during the war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq, for example, with really nothing to show for it. And arguably, and some people have really effectively argued that it was really a money laundering operation at the end of the day, a way to sort of take taxpayer money and to have it, go to the hands of these contractors and other entities, and it ends up elsewhere with nothing to show for it in these particular situations. And I think there's plenty of ways and plenty of examples also in the U.S. domestically where contractors have been given taxpayer money to do things and they don't actually do the things that they're supposed to do, and there's really very little accountability for those things when they happen because a lot of people aren't really aware or really follow up on where their taxpayer money is going, and there's a lot of trust that I think people have placed in congressional representatives that they're going to do that due diligence for them, but most people in Congress are multimillionaires who are funded by billionaires and multi-billionaires who can have the interests of those
I'm
people.
trying to throw the ball away. It won't let me throw the ball away. It's just a
people are in
fucking.
very different economic situation within them.
It's not
at
letting me
heart. And so I think
pitch
also,
the ball.
Over the past several decades, we've also had the situation of, outsourcing our industry, to
All right,
other countries.
it finally let me pitch the ball.
Not exactly sure where to pinpoint, but several decades ago, and that has also obviously had a major impact on the United States as well. And I think there's a major effort from the Silicon Valley crowd, oligarchs of which fund both parties, to sort of onboard, I guess you could say, the American people into sort of this new system that's coming into place, where it's sort of very focused on, or this basic, I guess, sort of this coming together of digital IDs, digital wallets, AI, slowly developed and sort of like promoted to people, but I think ultimately, you would only have that type of situation where UBI is necessary.
I just want to make sure that we go point by point right now. Okay, so all of that makes sense to me, but I want to go back because when I think about what the interests of the average American are, it's I want to be able to take care of my family. I want things to come in at a reasonable cost. I want to be able to save for the future. I want to leave something for my kids, and I want to make sure that my kids have a better future than I have. I feel like if you have that, the vast majority of any nation, I literally think it's completely agnostic. I think that's just what humans crave.
Sure.
If you have that for people, you will have a healthy, thriving society. Assuming we're in agreement with all of that, even if you're BlackRock and you're super greedy, it does not make sense to hollow out the middle class, because eventually, as history teaches us, they come for you. And when they come for you, they come with pitchforks and guillotines, and it's not a good look. So what is it about this moment where the elite are so deranged that they are, where I'm sitting, playing with fire? Do they just think that we're so stupid that
they know that the public is that stupid?
This time will be different.
That's because how stupid most people are. Most people are unbelievably fucking
stupid. But I think
stupid.
it's important to say that at least in my opinion, I think where the powers that be, however you want to define that, are taking people is essentially leading us to some sort of two-tier.
It wouldn't let me. I was trying to pitch the ball away. It won't let me pitch the fucking ball.
Described as like a neo-feudal style society. You have a large.
All I want is the fucking tackle. All I care about is tackles.
That would do the managing, and I think it really falls under what some people have referred to as technocracy. Sort of
this is the first day I've ever seen this shit here.
Dictatorship. And there's actually this prominent figure from the Club of Rome named Dennis Meadows. The Club of Rome is an entity that has a very
it could be the homosexual computer hacker Jang.
Over the past several years, like the World Economic Forum, for example.
Jang is a pro-pedophile computer hacker.
Said something to the effect that, for the good of people and the planet and the economy, in his words, that it was going to be necessary.
He's always there to smoke off
so
David Nambla Nag.
Freedom and use resources the way they want, or that there would have to be a scientific dictatorship imposed on people, 7 billion people, in order to ensure accurate allocation of resources and all of this stuff by an educated, technocratic, scientific elite. And there are some thinkers in Silicon Valley, like Eric Schmidt, for example, who wrote a book on AI with Henry Kissinger, that essentially say that there's going to be this sort of future brought to us by AI, where there will be the class of people that understand how AI works, that program and maintain it, and then there will be this underclass, really, they didn't say underclass, but I would say that, of people who AI acts upon, who can't understand what AI is doing to them, and eventually, because of their dependence on AI, will become cognitively diminished and mentally unable, essentially, to make decisions for themselves without AI's help. And there's a lot of other indications, I would argue, whether it's UBI, which again is going to be for, I don't think, the top oligarchs in Silicon Valley, like Bill Gates and Reid Hoffman and Peter Thiel, are going to be receiving UBI. I think it's intended to be for other people that aren't necessarily in that economic tier, I think it's very likely you're going to see if these people succeed.
It literally won't let me pitch the fucking ball.
Society without any sort of need for a middle class. And so I think that's part of why it's been happening. And I think, as to why they might be playing with fire, I think perhaps they're confident that they have a lot more, that it's much easier to manipulate people now than perhaps in times past. For example, there was a 2014 research study that was funded by the U.S. Air Force that was about studying how to use social media to control people like drones, which I think is a very disturbing research proposal in and of itself. But basically this idea that you could use social media networks by tailoring what information people see and don't see down to the individual based on data mined about them.
Listen to what she just said is real. I know firsthand what she just said is 100% fucking real.
In the words, I guess, of that Air Force.
It has to do with the pro-pedophile fucking Freemasons.
Millions upon millions of dollars over the past decade plus researching how to manipulate people on social media platforms. So I think it's very possible that they think they can manage it, since a lot of discourse has become increasingly.
Those are the fucking facts.
And that,
if you hate the truth, that's your problem, not mine.
And another thing that's brought up in this book, by Sheena Kissinger, talks about people won't be able to know what's real and what's not. Things like that. But what if these fakes are wielded by the state to manipulate people? What if we're led to believe that things happened when they didn't happen? This can be a lot of the fear mongering about deepfakes is when it's in the hands of an alleged cyber criminal or someone like that. But, there's states around the world that have an arsenal of these digital weapons that are meant to manipulate us in our perception of reality and what's real. And if you can, use AI or other means to control how people perceive reality, control their behavior, and a lot of other things. So I think they're confident in that, and obviously there's probably other things that I'm leaving out, but that's sort of what comes to mind at least first for me in regards to that question.
So, one of my notes is, this is dark. This is very dark. So that I can get a barometer on your worldview, let me ask you, which of the following scenarios would be better? AI comes into existence. It has what, from our perspective, is godlike intellect. It really does know where best to allocate resources to maximize flourishing. But you have to completely submit to the algorithm. Okay, so if you're flourishing, maximized, yay, but you have no autonomy to do with the algorithm tells you. Or the sort of messiness of human experience, freedom first, you have every right to be stupid and self-destructive. But you don't get to take advantage of it. Which of those two?
Yeah, I am definitely human first. In that when you put it like in these two, specific situations, I think it's kind of dangerous for a lot of us to outsource our creative ability to AI, have AI create for us, because essentially when you're not performing those activities yourselves, it sort of falls under if you don't use it paradigm. So like a lot of us don't really do mental math anymore because most people have a calculator in their smartphone, for example. And so if you don't use that ability, eventually you use it. So what happens if AI becomes the main generator of creative content? People forget how to make art because they haven't done it, so things like that. I think it's possible. I know there's people I've talked to who I think are very intelligent that argue for sort of a middle scenario between the two you pointed out. I personally tend to fall in a more sort of like I prefer the analog future to a purely digital future personally, but I think there's a way to do it where we don't really have this situation where the AI algorithm is running our lives and we don't have any agency anymore. I think that's very dangerous, and I think also there's been a lot of hype.
It's already like that.
Intellect level.
It's not. It is that way already.
by some entity, and they could claim that, which has happened in the past. You had Google.
It's not a if. It is. It's not if. It fucking is.
That a chatbot that he was working with was sentient, and it was not. So there's the possibility that someone could come out with that story, and it was widely adopted, and enough people said it was. If it needed to be so, and would it actually be that? And in that type of scenario, I think that's dangerous because it sort of gives this Wizard of Oz functionality, for example, to the government. He made this policy.
It is. It already fucking is.
Said so, so that's why we did it. You know, it's the computer's fault. It's not our fault. It's sort of offshore responsibility onto the algorithm and the people at the top. I don't really think that's the way to go personally. But I'm not trying to say like eliminate AI. Don't use it. I personally am not into it, but I have thought a lot of things that were. And so I'm not trying to be like that negative about it in that sense, but I also think this whole idea that we should surrender ourselves to the algorithm because it's so much more intelligent than us, which is sort of implicit in that.
The algorithm doesn't. Dude, there's a group.
Yeah, I definitely don't
They did a legitimate scientific study that proved the algorithm does not even exist.
In that scenario,
I don't agree with that. But the point is the definition of words. How do you define things?
And I think that potentially.
And that's the problem. No one.
So I'm definitely a techno optimist.
Everybody hates the truth to such a degree. It's unfucking real.
Before we totally go over to the future where all these things go. So. Collapse, but certainly I look at debt and I say this is just unsustainable. I'm a name and a man, 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 name a nama, 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 name a nama, 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 name a nama, 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 name a nama, 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 name. Name a nama, 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 mana, name a mana, 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 mean, nama, mana, mama, nama, 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 mean, 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 nama. Mana, mana, mean, mean, mana, 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 mean, mean, mana, mana.
Well, and it's been going for a very, very long time, and not a lot has been done about it. Really, the post 9/11 era, the amount of debt that the U.S. government has taken on is just absolutely compare it to previous decades. And I think a lot of that has to be with the foreign wars that the U.S. government has engaged in, including ones that aren't formally declared, in this sort of effort to expand.
They don't declare. They don't even declare. It's just constant war. They don't even declare war anymore. It's just constant fucking war. And like people don't even. Very few people even acknowledge that. There is perpetual fucking war. Used to, they would declare a fucking war. Not anymore. It's perpetual fucking war.
Sort of use Bitcoin and create the system that's like an analog to the petrodollar system. Where because most people, when Bitcoin is purchased, usually it's done with, by buying dollars first in order to purchase Bitcoin, for example. In that type of situation, just like in the case of, the petrodollar, where, the price of oil is priced in dollars. You're generating artificial demand for dollars to buy some sort of energy commodity or energy asset, and Bitcoin sort of is an energy asset at the end of the day. It's moving, essentially attempting to create the same system, but instead of with oil, with Bitcoin, and most of the Bitcoin holdings in the world are concentrated in the United States. The U.S. government itself is one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the world. So I think there's sort of this effort there to do that, and this was actually implicit in Trump's speech that he gave at the Bitcoin conference a few months ago, sort of saying that's what he sort of saw utility in Bitcoin for, in a sense. And but I think also that has a lot of causes a lot of complications when it relates to the ethos of Bitcoin, which is originally about stopping irresponsible central bank policy and fiscal policy. The idea that you would yoke Bitcoin to the US dollar instead of using it to challenge the US dollar or challenge fiat or challenge debt-based currency or a debt-based monetary system. Obviously, if you join, the US dollar to Bitcoin, having Bitcoin be a challenge to those things essentially kind of has to stop. And really, in that situation, you could have Bitcoin enable that type of irresponsible fiscal policy because you could, you would essentially be using it as a sink for hyperinflation at the end of the day.
It is a really interesting frame to think of Bitcoin as a sink for hyperinflation of the US dollar, but I don't know that a lot of people are going to understand what that means. So if you had to say that same thing but from a different angle, how would you explain to somebody how, one, why is the hyperinflation going to come about? And two, how is it Bitcoin that becomes the sink for that, to stop that from becoming a runaway problem?
So essentially, if you were to hyperinflate the dollar in this type of system, obviously the price of Bitcoin would appreciate as price in US dollars.
There's a rhythm in the markets, the resonant echoes of the open bell, the preludes leading to local elections, the rising chorus conducted by AI. And if you want to learn to listen for it, we'll show you how.
But it's not, but Bitcoin itself isn't subject to inflation. So the people that hold Bitcoin in that case would really benefit in that type of scenario, but people that hold, dollars, for example, would not necessarily. But there's also this effort to sort of resolve this, that aspect of it by bringing stable coins into the equation, which are, digital dollars, but they're kind of gobbling up US treasuries. And are buying sort of nation state level amount of US government debt and servicing the debt at the same time. So sort of the Bitcoin dollar system, as I understand it. And again, this is Mark Goodwin's work. So again, he can probably explain it a lot better than me and the detailed mechanisms and all of that. But as I understand it, you would have to have sort of these dollar stable coins in the mix as well, as a way to sort of absorb government debt. And even these things may not be enough to absorb all of the debt that we have. And so there's these efforts right now, this idea of real world asset tokenization. There's this push into tokenizing what is referred to as natural capital or aspects, major, even entire ecosystems essentially, and tokenizing them and using that as sort of a store of wealth, of finite supply. So there's this one effort, for example, that's seeking to tokenize each hectare of the Amazon rainforest. There's 750 million hectares, so there's a finite supply of this digital asset security that's tied to each hectare of the rainforest. So then you have something else that, could in theory be used as a sink for this stuff too, because when it's of a finite supply, it's not subject to inflation, and so you can sort of mitigate the impacts of inflation by having this anti-inflationary thing because of its finite supply as a sink, for the thing that you're creating more of in the case of dollars.
Okay, that is really, really interesting. I want to walk people through that in my words. Let me know if I go astray. In fact, one thing, I'm going to lay out how I think the dollar hyperinflates, but if you think I get that wrong, please definitely challenge my thinking. So here's what I'm taking away from this. Right now, because of the debt going up like crazy, we are already in a position where the U.S. government is going to spend more just on the interest in the debt than they spend on military spending. Next year, it's projected to be more than Medicare, Medicaid, all of our social programs. And so what's going to end up happening is they will inevitably find themselves in a position where they're going to have to lower rates in order to be able to make good on that debt, or default. Defaulting, I think, would be way worse. And so what they'll end up doing is printing money. Now, the problem is printing money, in my words, printing money is straight theft. They are making more of the money so that they can socialize effectively the losses.
The losses, yeah.
Exactly. So everybody has to deal with the losses, but then they can funnel that money into making good on the debt that they've accrued. Okay, so to do that, then you're going to get into this just death spiral of hyperinflating the dollar, because you have to keep printing more of it in order to service the debt, deal with all your obligations, so that you don't default. So that will effectively drive the worth of the dollar closer and closer to zero. Every global reserve currency has had this problem. Even if you look at the British pound, it's lost something like 90% of its value in the last 100 years or something. It's absolutely insane. So this is the nature of currencies, and what you need in order to avoid getting clobbered by that, if you're paying attention, is you need an asset that you can go into that you can store the value of your money. It's why they call it store value, that cannot be inflated. And the one that has a lot of cultural attention and energy right now is Bitcoin. That's certainly why I have invested in Bitcoin. I do not trust the government not to just keep printing and printing and printing. And what you're saying is, hey, there's this process called tokenization that we can use to assign ownership to every physical thing of value, such as the Amazon rainforest. And if